You just made a great decision because you decided to tune in to the Football v Football podcast. This is the top safeties of all time, the top 10 safeties. We got OY, we got NF, and we're going to need you to stick around to the end here because we got another shocking list, believe it or not. All we do is drop shocking lists. NF, OY, how y'all doing?
Great, man. Doing good. Thanks for having me. Good.
Now I've just polishing off some Saudi-made yogurt. But let's go ahead and jump into this list here. There we go. Saudi-made plain yogurt. Sounds absolutely delicious. OY was talking about some vanilla bean yogurt. Everyone run out and get some vanilla bean yogurt after this. So this is, again, a modern era list. This is a continuation of our top 10 greatest position players of all time. And some things to note here. Solo tackles did not become a stat until 1994. Okay, just so everyone knows. And passes deflected did not become a stat until 1999. So just so you know here, all these players that we have that started playing a little bit earlier than that, that's not accounted for them. So let's go ahead and get started, fellas. This is our collective list.
I think it's also worth noting that we're not going to mention any of the Woodsons, even though they shifted to safeties. We consider them cornerbacks.
That's true. They were covered in the last one. And they're mostly cornerbacks. They're known for quarterbacks.
Oh, right.
There is. Well, yeah. Well, there might be one. We'll see. We'll see if he made it onto this list. Again, Rodney is not here. He gave me a list a couple hours ago, and then just didn't show up. So I don't know where he's at. If somebody knows where he's at, please let us know. Whoever's torturing him, huh?
So get those milk cartons out.
Get the milk cartons out. Whoever tortured him for the last episode, the first 30 minutes, please. It's very inconvenient for us. Please stop doing that. We appreciate it. We're going to jump into our number 10 guy here. At number 10, we got LeRoy Butler, the great Green Bay Packer. He was on the three of our lists. He wasn't on the Rada's list, but Rodney's not here, so it doesn't matter. OY, we'll go ahead and start with you. LeRoy Butler, number 10. Where'd you have him? What do you think?
Yeah, so I had him at number 8 on my list. So it's about like where I had him. One of the best safeties of the 90s. Sometimes I feel like he gets a little bit too much credit, to be honest, but I do think he was a great safety. Super Bowl champ, multiple time, All-Pro, All-Decade team. I just remember he was a really balanced player. He could picks, he could get sacks, so he could play back, he could play in the box. I think his picks were like 38, 39, and I think he had like 23 sacks, something like that. I was looking at earlier. So he's a really balanced player. And those 90s Packers teams were heavily like relying on Brett Favre, but I think to the extent that the defense came through, he was definitely like a leader of that defense, and it was very him and Reggie White, of course. Those two kind of led that defense. But yeah, definitely worthy of 10 of the best safeties of the decade. So not surprised to see him on here.
Yeah, Nanef, at the end of the last podcast, you swore off LeRoy Butler. You said do not put him on this list, but you put him on the list.
That was OY.
Oh, was it?
Not me.
Yeah, that was
OY.
My apologies. NF, what do you think of LeRoy? LeRoy Butler.
LeRoy Butler, yeah. I had him at number 9. I'm kind of surprised Ludley didn't have him on his list because, he had that culture aspect. He invented the Lambeau Leap.
Oh, really? I thought that was a
really
early thing.
Yeah, he was the first person to ever do the Lambeau Leap. Yeah.
The LeRoy Leap.
So, he had 38 picks. I think White touched on this, 20 sacks, Super Bowl champ, 4-time All-Pro, 4-time Pro Bowl. Consistent player, consistent safety. I had him number 9.
Yeah, I had him number 9 as well. Just incredibly balanced in all facets. In a limited time as well. Played for only 12 years and was a cornerstone to those Super Bowl teams for the Packers. You guys mentioned it. He's top 15 among safeties and interceptions with 38. He had another interception for a touchdown in the playoffs as well. 13 forced fumbles, couple fumble TDs. His tackling was actually not that great relative to the rest of the safeties. He only had 474 solo tackles. And he played, before passes defense became a stat essentially. So he's kind of a well-rounded player, but not nearly the best safety of all time. But he is top 10. We're going to move on to the next guy on our list, this is going to be an interesting one. And I'm going to tell you why in a second. Johnny Lynch, the current general manager of the 49ers, but in his time, a great safety for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think he was with the Broncos as well, if I'm not mistaken. The interesting thing about this one is he was on, I think, OY's list. He removed him, but he was number 3 on the Rada's list. And listen, the Rada's not here to talk about it. So OY, we can, because I know he was on your list briefly. Talk to us about John Lynch, and we'll say a few words. And maybe the Rada will write in the comments why he put him on here.
The most overrated safety on this list. I think he was a great player. I think he's definitely he's worthy of Hall of Fame and everything. But I definitely think he's very overhyped. I remember he has stats and he has longevity. He has a ring, all that stuff. But I remember watching him, and I was never wow to the point where I was like, oh yeah, this guy's a top 10 player at his position all time, or this guy's the elite of the elite. I never really thought that about him. Again, great player, probably a Hall of Famer. I mean, he is a Hall of Famer, but to me, I think he got in a little too early. But whatever. I think he was okay in coverage. To me, he was always more of a physical kind of, in the box type safety. And he also played on that great defense, with Derek Brooks and Simeon Rice and all those guys, Warren Sapp. But I mean, he obviously contributed to it. So I don't want to hate too much. The reason I took him off again was only because after thinking about it, after talking to Naif about it, I realized that there were probably guys I would have above him, but I'm not too upset that he's coming in at number 9. I think that's fine.
Yeah. NF played with Rondé, played with that great Tampa Bay defense. Was he a big part of it, or did he just kind of benefit from them?
I mean, on the back end, for sure. I mean, but he wasn't even the best defensive back on that team, right? I think Rondé Barber was way more important to that defense. He was solid. He was really solid. Won a Super Bowl with that Buccaneers team. 9 Pro Bowls. He was consistent. But like I said, I don't know. I just thought there were at least 10 safeties that were better than him. I think I had him at number 11 or 12.
Yeah.
I think I initially had him on the list. The first list I sent you, Omar.
Yeah. You guys both had a change of heart after your conversations. I would barely have him cracking my top 20. I mean, I'm a stats guy, and his stats are just maybe top 20, maybe at number 20. 26 picks. He had 2 more in the playoffs, and all things considered, because of how much how big they were supposed to be in the playoffs, that's really not that much. 68 passes defense, 16 forced fumbles, 727 solo tackles combined. He had over 1,000 tackles. But really, when you weigh everything and the defense that he was on and the help that he was getting and the pressure that was kind of pushed to some of the other guys, they were an absolutely stacked defense, like OY mentioned, and he kind of benefited from that as well. So that's to the detriment here. So he's number 9 because of Roddy, but Roddy's not here. You guys removed him from your list. I think justifiably so. So we're going to keep on going on this list here. Moving in to number 8. This is another really interesting one here. Another really interesting
Harrison
one.
Smith. It's Harrison Smith. I love the had him more.
It's a tie between Darren Woodson and Steve Atwater at number 8. So both of these guys are just on the both of yours list. Neither of them were on my list or on Roddy's list. So we'll start with NF here. Talk to us
Wow,
about
you didn't have Woodson or Atwater on your list?
Darren Woodson or Atwater. No, did not.
Wow. I had Atwater number 4, and I had Darren Woodson number 6.
Yep.
Let's see. Let's start with Woodson. I think Woodson is probably the most underrated safety of all time. He doesn't get the respect. He doesn't get the love. He was really an anchor of that Dallas Cowboys defense, especially when they moved into like 3 wide receiver sets. This guy played a lot of nickel corner, and he was going up against top-notch wide receivers like Jerry Rice and Herman Moore, and all those number 1 wide receivers. 4-time All-Pro, 3-time Super Bowl champ, 1,350 tackles. I think he should have been on your list somewhere.
But you said he was
Atwater,
going against their top receivers, but he played safety.
He did, but when the NFL started shifting to like 3 wide receiver sets, he would play like that nickel safety where he'd go up against the slot receiver.
Interesting.
Sometimes that was Jerry Rice, sometimes that was number 1 receivers.
Right.
Steve Atwater, 2-time Super Bowl champ, 8-time Pro Bowler, 1,180 tackles. Also super underrated. I think this guy should have been the Super Bowl MVP against that Broncos win against the Packers. If you go back and watch like that last year, so I think he broke up a 4th and 6th play. He just went crazy in that whole game. But the voters favor offense, so he didn't get it. But honestly, I thought he should have been MVP of that game.
OY, you inverted the 4 and 6, so they tied exactly. Talk to me about Darren Woodson, the great Cowboy, and Steve Atwater, the great Bronco.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I actually put Woodson so high is because everybody rates him so low, and I'm trying to steer that a little bit in the other direction because I do think he is the most underrated player at his position in NFL history.
Wow.
I think this guy was, I think this guy was probably the best safety of the 90s, or at least one of the top 2 safeties of the 90s. When he started college, or when he came out of college, he was actually a linebacker, and then they moved him to safety. Super athletic. He could cover, he could hit, he could tackle. He's the franchise all-time leader in tackles of the Cowboys, and so that's, I think, very impressive considering the defensive players that we've had. I know he doesn't have the numbers that, because I know you said you're a stats guy. He doesn't have like those picks and those sacks, but watching him and the tone that he set on the defense, I think he, really was like the commander of the defense. Like Naif said, he could cover, he could hit. This guy was a really well.
Omar, can you speak about that 2003 season where we had nobody?
2000.
And he left. Yeah,
I think we
talk
had
about that.
Roy, right? We had just drafted Roy Williams. And by the way,
Oh, what a pick.
by the way, this also speaks to Darren Woodson. After Woodson retired, Roy Williams, who for a time was my favorite player, he just completely was not the same. Like, it was over for him, which makes me sad, but that also speaks to Woodson's greatness. I remember a story, I think it was 2003 actually, when Bill Parcells got so pissed at the team that he refused to coach practice. So Woodson took over and led the whole practice, the whole team, not just defense, like the whole team. So Woodson was like the commander, the general of that defense. And once like those 90s teams started to decay, once Aikman, Emmett, Irvin retired, Woodson took over that whole team. And Naif knows for like a good 5, 6, 7 years, he kind of ran that team. So
that 2003 defense was the number 1 defense in the NFL too.
And he was the only player. Like Roy was great.
And he was the catalyst for sure.
Yeah. So I think Woodson should be in the Hall of Fame like yesterday.
Wow.
As to Steve Atwater, I think he might be the greatest in the box safety in league history. Like, this guy was probably the greatest hitter. Like, if we're talking just pound for pound hitter, he almost reminds me of like the Dominique Wilkins of safeties, where Wilkins may have been the greatest dunker. I think Atwater was probably the greatest hitter. That hit he had.
Like that.
Yeah, that hit he had on the Nigerian Nightmare. I forgot his name.
Okoye, Christian Okoye.
It's like a legendary hit, man. Like, he knocks the guy back, but he's never been knocked backwards. I agree with Knife. He was an anchor on that.
He was never the same afterwards either, man.
He wasn't.
Yeah, he wasn't the same afterwards.
Again, he's not a stats guy. These are guys that you probably have to watch and see how they impact the game. So I definitely believe they should be higher, but I'm glad that they at least made the list. I'll say that, considering that Rodney didn't have them, and I'm a little surprised you didn't have them either. Actually,
Well,
that's what I'm surprised.
well, okay. So I'm gonna go over my criteria again. It's slightly different for safeties from cornerbacks, but of course, I value the interceptions, the forced fumbles, the things that turn defense into offense. But in this instance, tackles are also really relevant because a lot of times, judging, free safety, strong safety, whatever, a big part of their job is also tackles, obviously. So I weighed that a little bit more. Passes, defense as well. But when you have Darren Woodson and Steve Atwater at 23 and 24 interceptions, and there's other guys on this list that have 60 interceptions, that have 40 more. Essentially, it's just I put them on here to kind of look at and evaluate. But Woodson 23 interceptions, 3 more in the playoffs, which is good. 2 interception touchdowns, 12 forced fumbles, 639 solo tackles, and then combined tackles 967. I think that's okay. That's a pretty good resume. But of course, you guys as Cowboys fans have that nuance that you guys just talked about, the impact on the team, the impact on the game. And is he related to any of the other Woodsons? What's up with having a last name in Woodson and being a defensive back? That's just a coincidence?
It looks like it, yeah. It's pretty crazy.
just change.
So where would you rank him? Where would you rank him, Omar?
Closer to Lynch, maybe like in the 20, around 20, something like that. There's other guys that I can mention later that I had outside of the top 10. But they weren't even there for me, to be honest with you. Atwater, 24 interceptions, 6 forced fumbles, only 334 solo tackles, but somehow 1,188 combined tackles. What you talked about, I think
he had 190 tackle season.
Yeah, I think I mean, maybe he had like a really good. He played like really well in spots. You guys mentioned playoffs, and he was a hard hitter, maybe like a Kam Chancellor type.
Get Yakubi on here.
Yo, that's right. Yeah, where's Yakubi? Yakubi's not here as well. He's part of the beef that's going on with the new Broncos. That's pretty crazy what's going on. But anyway, so that's why I left them off the list. The stats are just like not there for me. But I like that you guys have more nuance here to talk about it as the impact he had on the Cowboys. We'll move into the number 6 guy who had an impact on another team, and number 6. Rodney Harrison at number 6, the great New England Patriot. This was a guy that was on the 3 of our lists, not on the Rada's list. We'll start with Naif here, the great New England Patriot. Where'd you have him? What do you think?
I mean, listen, man. If Rodney doesn't join, we got to get his list at the end of this call.
I'll run down. I'll run down that list for sure.
Okay. Number 5. I had him at number 5. So I mean, that's close. I mean, he's a 2-time Super Bowl champ, very consistent, over 1,200 tackles, 30 sacks, which are the most by any defensive back. Also had 34 picks, and also in their Super Bowl run, 2004, 3 playoff games, 4 interceptions. He was really crucial to that Patriots team making it all the way. He was very consistent, man. He was really, really good for a really long time. And I had him, it's number 5.
Number 5. All right. OY. He was on yours as well. Talk about Rodney.
Yeah, so I think I had him at like number 9. Number 9. So I originally didn't have him on the list, but then I kind of thought about it, and I agree with the knife. Another balance. I don't think he was like the greatest in coverage, but I also don't think he was like a huge liability either. Even though the David Tyree catch was made on him.
That's not his fault.
We talked about that. He was the first 30-30 guy in history, right? First safety to have 30 picks.
Incredible.
Which is impressive.
Yeah.
Very balanced. I think I would say that second half of his career with the Patriots, even though he was a good player before, I think playing with Belichick really elevated his rank and really turned him into like that Hall of Fame type player.
Yeah.
So yeah, man. I just remember. I will say this though. I think of all these players that we have on here, he's probably the most like borderline like dirty player. Like you remember, like some of those.
Sure.
Well,
sure.
I think he's number 2 in terms of dirtiness. We'll get to the other one later. Yeah. So as far as Rodney Harrison goes, so one of my biggest takeaways by diving into these defensive back stats is when you look at those Patriots defenses during the reign of what they call Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. Obviously, they were very influential. When you talk about Ty Law, Lawyer Milloy, who I'm surprised didn't get on this list, and Devin McCourty, who I'm also very surprised didn't get on this list. I had both of those guys on my list. The reason for all those Patriots Super Bowls is much more than just Tom Brady. And my opinion of Brady going through some of these defensive backs stats has actually gone down a little bit, looking at how historically incredible his defensive backs were throughout the decades. So that's one of my biggest takeaways here. I had Rodney Harrison at number 6, 34 interceptions. That's very good. Seven interceptions in the playoffs. That's big time. That's really big time. 2 interception touchdowns, 78 pass deflections, and he played for 5 years before that was even a stat. 15 forced fumbles, 2 more in the playoffs, and 920 tackles. He's 4th amongst safeties in solo tackles. He played for 15 years. Just a really, really incredible player that I continued to move up my list as I saw more of what he did. So Rodney Harrison at number 6, surprisingly, the only Patriot to crack this list here. But we're going to go ahead and move into the top 5 here. So at top 5, number 5, we have, wait for it, Brian Dawkins, the great Philadelphia Eagle, the guy that now, isn't that the guy? No, that's Troy Vincent, sorry. There's another guy that it's like NFLPA guy. For some reason, I thought it was Dawkins. So again, he was on the 3 of our lists. He was not on the Rada's list. If everyone can get a hashtag going, can we get a hashtag going? Where is Rady? Can everyone please drop that in the chat? Drop that on Twitter. That's pretty much the theme of these podcasts now, not knowing where Rady is. OY, if you want to get us
Buenos Aires or something.
Probably, yeah. So in a shisha place with a flag that doesn't make sense, with disparate letters, with a lot of noise. OY, he played for y'all's rival team. What do you think of Brian Dawkins?
Hey man, I have a lot of respect for Dawkins. Kind of watching his game, I actually had him at number 5. I'll say this: I do think he's slightly overrated by kind of like the general media. Maybe because he does like that whole whatever.
Yeah.
But he was a great player. Yeah, but he was a great player. Definitely a Hall of Fame guy. His stats are pretty impressive. I think when I was comparing him to some of the other safeties, and he has longevity. You know what I mean? This guy played for a really long time and played at a high level. So I do think he deserves to be on here. Number 5, I'm totally fine with that. And let's be real, he was the face of that defense for a long time, and he was an intimidator for them. He did kind of set the tone. So definitely deserves to be on here, even though I think the media kind of runs with his whole persona a little bit. But it's all good.
Yeah, definitely a very excitable guy. Don't you agree, NF?
Yeah, definitely top 3 rah-rah after Ray Lewis and maybe another guy. But consistent. This guy was good. He was a hard hitter. I hated playing him twice a year as a Cowboys fan. But yeah, he was really good. He was a 5-time All-Pro, 9-time Pro Bowler, 26 sacks, 37 picks. He had 36 forced fumbles.
Yes, exactly. That's the big stat. That's a huge stat.
Yeah, that's huge. I had him at number 7. I think him not winning a Super Bowl maybe
He did.
brought him down. Did he with the Broncos?
No. Well,
He wasn't with the Eagles when they won a
he
Super
didn't
Bowl.
win as a player. My bad. I thought he
Yeah.
did, but he didn't.
Yeah. I think that's why I have him a little lower on the list, but he's definitely a top 10 safety, 100%. Number 7 on my list.
Yeah, I had him high. I had him number 4. He's another guy that I continued to move up as I saw more of what he did. 37 interceptions. That's top 15 amongst modern safeties. 4 more in the playoffs. That's big time. 2 interception touchdowns. 153 pass deflections. That's first amongst safeties, and that's 8th all time. That's huge for passes defensed. Even after playing 3 years before the stat was counted. And like you mentioned, 36 forced fumbles is first amongst safeties by a large margin. No other safety is even close to 36 forced fumbles. He's 13th all time in that, and of course number one, like I said, in safeties. And he had 3 more in the playoffs. So he had 30.
I bet you like just thinking about trying to remember his game. Like 70% of those were like strip sacks.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. However you get it, whether it's the peanut punch or the strip sack, the Dawkins strip sack.
He was
Really
strong.
good.
He was definitely strong.
Very.
The strongest strong safety.
For sure. So he had 39 total because he had 3 more in the playoffs. He had one of the fumble return for a TD. And 911 tackles. That's 5th among safeties all time, 21st amongst anybody. And like you said, played for 16 years. Now I'm going to mention another guy here that didn't make this list. I think it's kind of criminal he didn't make this list, so I'm just going to bring him up. You guys remember a guy named Eugene Robinson? A guy that played for the Seahawks, the Falcons, the Packers,
Rams
that guy?
too, right?
I don't think he played for the Rams. Maybe he did.
No?
Mostly, so Eugene Robinson got to those. He went to 3 straight Super Bowl. After playing for the Seahawks for many years, he went to Green Bay and Atlanta. Sorry?
No, I know.
He didn't play for. No,
He did, huh?
Not the Rams. He played for the He played for the Seahawks for like almost 10 years, and then went to Green Bay and Atlanta, and he went to 3 straight Super Bowls with them. So he won one of the Super Bowls with Favre, and then also went to another one with the Packers, and then went to another one with the Falcons. This guy had 57 interceptions, which is insane. I'll go through some of his other stuff here. I just want to mention them because so primarily he had 1.4 combined total tackles. That is incredible. It's really impressive. Anyway, I won't belabor the point on him, but I had Eugene Robinson as 5 and Dawkins at 4, and I just moved Dawkins ahead of Eugene Robinson. Wow. And even though Robinson had 20 more interceptions than Brian Dawkins, the forced fumbles really evened out the impact you have on the game in terms of turning the ball over. So he also had an initial 4 in the playoffs and then 3 forced fumbles in the playoffs. But I just wanted to mention I had Eugene Robinson and Brian Dawkins really close. If anyone has a chance to go back and watch the Eugene Robinson, that guy was incredible, even though he didn't make this list.
I remember. He was really good. He was a really good free safety. I remember.
Amazing player. 57 interceptions. That can't be overlooked. So we're going to move on to our number 4 guy here. At number 4, we have Darren Sharper. The first guy on the list that was on everyone's list, including the Rada's list. Hashtag where is Roddy? Everyone get that going, please. OY, we'll start with you here, Darren Sharper. So you can speak about it because I know initially he was left off and then he was put on. Talk about the complex legacy of Darren Sharper.
Yeah, so we're gonna keep this to strictly on the field production. We're not gonna talk about his whole.
Despite what Wikipedia says about it, they put that before they even say he was an NFL player. Like, it's that I don't know. That's too much.
You have to talk. I mean, for me, it affected his standing. To be honest.
Really?
On my list. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you like to talk about that thing he does, so I mean, I'm sure you'll bring it up.
So I will say it is one reason I initially left him off, but then when I thought about it, if you think about purely in football terms, the guy was amazing. He was the second best coverage safety of his time, right? He has like over 60 picks, like all these return yards. Like he was such a weapon a legit weapon on the defense, and he did it for multiple teams: Saints, the Vikings. I think there was another one.
Packers.
And he did it in big time moments too. You know what I mean? Like the playoffs, the guy came through. He always showed up, and he's one of the greatest Madden players of all time. So I mean,
there you go.
You know what I mean? You can't take that away from him. So,
right after Greg Jennings.
Yeah, he did. That alone should get him on this list.
F you, Gumby. And what do you think of Darren Sharper? He's another guy you mentioned at the end of the last podcast.
Listen, man. Statistically speaking, this is a top 3 safety.
Yes.
I had him at number 8, I believe. Number 8.
Tragic.
I couldn't justify having him up there, but if we're just talking stats here and how he was as a player, definitely a top 3 safety. This guy, let's just ramble off some stats here. 63 interceptions.
Yep.
13 touchdowns.
Yep.
6-time All-Pro.
I think you might know.
Is that the he's tied for the most defensive touchdowns of all time with Darren Woodson. Sorry, not with Darren Woodson, with Rod Woodson.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're talking just safeties, pure safeties, Rod Woodson played a little corner.
Right.
6-time All-Pro, led the league in interceptions twice, led the league in interception yards 3 times. I think so not his last year, the year before, he led the league in interceptions.
Yep.
With 9. This guy was unbelievable. He was out of this world, but he also raped and drugged females, and for that reason, he fell on my list. He was number 8.
Yeah.
As I said, if that never happened, he would have probably been top 3.
It's kind of funny that because of that, you dropped him to like number 8 instead of just taking him off the list.
He kept him within the top 10, but you knock him down a few pegs for each time that
But it
happened.
says something about how statistically good he was, man. This guy was unbelievable. That he still made the list.
Yeah, I had him at like number 7.
Considering that.
I agree. Like statistically, the guy was just like insane.
If that doesn't happen, how do you not have him as a top 3, top 5 corner safety?
I mean, listen, I had him at number 2, fellas. I had him at number 2. He's the second best safety of all time in my eyes. Like you mentioned, 63 picks. That's 8th all time, most for a safety, or second most. Second, 2 more in the playoffs. 11 interception touchdowns and 1 more in the playoffs. He has 123 passes defense. That's 3rd all time among safeties. 740 tackles, 949 combined tackles. Played for 14 years. So I'm not going to reveal exactly, but I'm going to tell you it was very close to me between Ronnie Lott and Darren Sharper. But Sharper had 7 more touchdowns than Ronnie Lott. Just had a bigger impact. Like I said, tied with Rod Woodson for the most defensive touchdowns
I don't know about
of
a
all
bigger
time.
impact, but
Yes. I'm going to give you the nuance later as I talk about how he had the bigger, a very similar impact.
okay.
So yeah, I won't reveal some of the other stuff I have to say about Sharper until a little bit later on.
One of the hardest hitting safeties in the league, though.
Absolutely.
The hilarious part about that is he wasn't even like a hard hitter.
No, he wasn't a hard hitter, no.
No, but
I mean, listen, he'd take your top off if you were exposed. If you're like,
what a line! Double entendre. Oh my God, that was effortlessly done. Well done. We're gonna move in to our number 3 guy here, and this is gonna be the most controversial guy on this list for sure. Number 3, we have Troy Polamalu. At number 3, the great Pittsburgh Steeler, the great endorser of Head and Shoulders. He was on Naif's list, OY's list, and the Rada's list. He did not crack my top 10.
Oh wow!
whoa, dude.
Did not crack my top 10.
All right, no. You're taking the stat. You're going way too deep into the stats now.
No, absolutely.
I had him at number 3.
I know you did. All you guys had him so high. That's why he ended up number 3 on the list.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can I talk about this?
Yeah, go ahead and talk
2
about
times
it.
Super Bowl champ, 8-time Pro Bowler, 6-time All-Pro, under 7 pass deflections, Defensive Player of the Year, 2010.
Yeah.
So on that great Steelers defense, this guy was the Defensive Player of the Year. Dude, one of the greatest. We're saying in one of these years, the greatest player on defense was a safety, and it was this guy. And he doesn't even make your list.
Didn't even make my list. No, not good enough. He didn't actually. I looked at both his regular season and his playoff stats, and I'm not impressed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
The greatest hair of all time.
Hey, listen, if you want to put him in the Hair Hall of Fame and tell me that's why he won Defensive Player of the Year, then I'll give you that.
I mean, Justin Herbert might be coming for him, but
Oh boy.
and Trevor Lawrence. Yeah. Who?
Clay Matthews.
Clay Matthews is up there.
Yeah.
Clay Matthews is definitely up there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how he doesn't make your list. I can't wait to hear this.
Yeah, I initially thought, oh, maybe there'd be a few guys above him, but I had a hard time dropping him lower than 3 because I'm not even going to get into the stats. This guy had the greatest instincts as a safety I've ever seen. I just remember so many times where he lined up over the ball and he knew exactly when the snap was coming in. So he'd either jump over the line, block the punt, block the punt, block the kick, get the guy in the backfield, whatever. His instincts were the best, and I think that allowed him to play at a speed, like at a much faster speed than the rest of the guys on defense or the rest of basically anybody else on the field. So if you watch him, he's constantly in the backfield, or he's constantly just blowing up plays. So I know he maybe doesn't have those sacks or picks or at least those numbers, but I think his impact on the game, the way he was flying around and blowing up plays before they could develop, kind of is what sets him apart, at least from what I remember about him as a player.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to deny his cultural impact on the game and the way he looked and his flowing hair as he was making all these plays. That to me made it look a little more dramatic and exciting than he really was. I'll read off his stats here: 32 interceptions. That's good. 3 more in the playoffs. 3 interception returns for a touchdown. 1 more in the playoffs. I would have thought he would have had more than this given his impact. 107 passes defense. That's okay. 14 forced fumbles. 14 forced fumbles. That's it. From this guy, that was, like you said, he had a lot of really good instincts for the ball, but only resulted in 14 forced fumbles. And even with the tackles, 583 solo tackles, 783 combined tackles. Listen, I think he was pretty good at everything, but elite at nothing, categorically, stat-wise. Maybe you can say his instincts, but he was elite at nothing stat-wise. And I also view him as a dirty player, and I never forgot what he did at USC to that poor, defenseless punt returner. And to me, a lot of times that instinct that you guys are mentioning crossed over into recklessness. And he was like a very kind of unhinged player a lot of times, and he didn't play within the parameters of football. And I think sometimes it did cost him. Yes, they did win a Super Bowl, but there was a lot of recklessness that his stats don't merit it for me. What he did in the playoffs doesn't merit it for me. If you're going to say he had 1 year where he was Defensive Player of the Year, that's good. I think that might have been 1 year where maybe not a defensive players weren't good.
Huh? I think they thought he was elite that year. He was voted Defensive Player of the Year.
For 1 year, maybe.
Look, he was definitely reckless. He was definitely reckless.
Too much so.
And this guy was dirty. You said he's the dirtiest.
In my eyes, this guy's the dirtiest player. This guy's the dirtiest player. Dirtiest safety I've ever seen, for sure.
But I don't think it was ill-willed.
But I want you. Have you seen what he did when he was at USC? Have you watched him at USC?
I did. Where he knocked out that punt return.
And he did actually multiple stuff like that. Even when he's jumping over the line and jumping into people and stuff like that. Listen, I know there's effort, and I know he's like a soft-spoken guy, but the way he plays is actually not humble at all. It's very reckless. It's very dirty. And in addition to these stats,
Sharper number 2, right, or number 3?
I had him number 2, but listen. I'm talking about on the field. Touche. I'm talking about on the field. On the field, Darren Sharper was not the kind of dirty player that Troy Polamalu was. No way. But anyway, we'll go ahead and move into our top 2 guys here. This is going to be an interesting one here. Who's going number 1? Who's going number 2? And number 2, we got Ronnie Lott at number 2. He was on my list and OY's list and NF's list. He wasn't on the Rada's list at all, and that impacted this. And listen, he's not even here. He's not even here, and he impacted this list in a way that put Ronnie Lott at number 2. Go ahead and talk about it, guys, because I mean the informed football fan here will tell you Ronnie Lott is probably number 1.
The greatest safety of all time.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Remember when we were talking about corners and I said that maybe Deion's the greatest DB of all time? The guy he's in competition with is Ronnie Lott. Yeah. And the reason I say that is because Ronnie Lott was also a corner who played safety. So he could cover. He could cover number ones, and he could also hit. He was also an in-the-box defender. So you basically had like this linebacker corner hybrid in one, and he could do both at an elite all-time great level. I'll leave the stats to you guys, but I think the impact he made on the game, kind of speaks for itself. We all know the finger story about him chopping off his finger so he could keep playing, which is like crazy, right? That's like insane. But to get to this level, you need a little bit of crazy. So, to be honest, I thought 1 and 2 could have been a toss-up, and I never thought I'd say that until the number 2 guy, who's probably, I'm assuming, number 1 on this list. But as far as Ronnie Lott goes, best safety I've ever seen. Could do both, cover, hit, tackle, whatever you needed. The most complete safety of all time.
NF, talk about
Yeah.
Lott.
What more can you say? I mean, he's the number 1 safety, I think, far and away. 63 interceptions, 8 All-Pros, 4 Super Bowls. This guy played in 20 playoff games, had 9 interceptions and 2 touchdowns in 20 playoff games. 9 interceptions. That's almost half a pick per playoff game.
Yeah.
4 Super Bowls. Do you guys remember any other defensive player from that San Francisco teams? Those San Francisco teams that won those Super Bowls?
No.
Maybe the later ones?
I don't.
I don't remember anybody else. I don't remember anybody else, honestly.
Yeah.
Maybe like Merton Hanks. I don't know if Ronnie Lott was. Yeah, Ronnie Lott was still there. I don't, honestly. I think this guy's the greatest safety of all time. And the finger cutting, man. How the hell did Rodney not even have him on the list? Where'd you have him?
He played in the 80s.
Omar?
OY? OY had him number 1. Both you guys had him number 1.
No, I know
Me.
OY had him number 1.
Yeah.
Where'd you have him?
So Rodney is not completely to blame here because I had him at number 3, and I'm gonna tell you why here. I'll read his stats, of course. 63 interceptions, like you mentioned, second amongst the modern safeties. 9 more in the playoffs. That's huge. He had 5 interception return touchdowns. That's also huge. 16 forced fumbles. He played before. Solo stats were a stat, but 1.1K combined tackles and played before passes defense. There's a lot of stuff here you couldn't really chew on, but played for 14 years. But I'm going to go back to my Darren Sharper versus Ronnie Lott argument here, because to me, when you talk about Sharper, he was the guy that was better at turning defense into offense. In fact, he was all-time great at that. However, Ronnie Lott was far, far better in the playoffs, better at tackles, better at forced fumbles. But what this came down to me ultimately is an era argument. And I didn't mention this in the beginning, but I've mentioned it in previous podcasts. It is more difficult to play defense the later you play because defense continues to get officiated out of the game. So it's really a matter of defense being easier to play when Ronnie Lott was a great safety than it is when Darren Sharper was a great safety. And, I can talk. I'm going to talk more about, this next guy that we're going to talk about here and compare those 3. But we're going to go to our number 1 guy here in case you can't guess it already. It's Ed Reed, guys, far and away. I mean, this guy was a legend, the great Baltimore Raven. Great player. Many facets of the game.
Texan.
Terrible Houston Texan, but he did play. He did wear that jersey. NF, tell us about Ed Reed and why you thought he was not as good as Ronnie Lott.
No, it's not that I didn't think he was as good as Ronnie Lott. I just thought Ronnie Lott was the greatest safety ever. Ed Reed was my favorite safety. So just watching him, just to watch, this guy was my favorite safety. 6-time All-Pro, 64 interceptions. It's crazy. Defensive Player of the Year 2004, which I think stands for something when you're a safety and you're winning Defensive Player of the Year. That's my whole argument with Polamalu.
Really? Because I think we need to look at every single defensive player in the league and see who is he going up against.
No, but the whole league decides that you're the greatest defensive player.
Every year that award is given out.
Yeah, but when it happens in a year where you win the Super Bowl, I think
Touche.
it stands for something, right?
Touche.
Yeah. So Ed Reed, had 1,590 interception return yards. This guy's had 106-yard return, 107-yard return. This guy was the definition of a ball hawk. Bill Belichick speaks about just having a game plan around this guy and how this guy like gave him nightmares. I can understand people putting Ed Reed number one, but I think a lot of it is because Ronnie Lott played in the 80s and not a lot of people have seen his film. But yeah, I still have Lott number one, Reed number two.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely very close. OY, what do you think about this Lott versus Reed comparison? Where did you have Reed? What do you think about him?
Yeah, so this was I wouldn't say a toss up, but I would say I could understand why somebody would put Ed Reed at number one. Reed is probably the smartest, most cerebral safety I've ever seen. He was the definition of playing that center fielder role back there, being like the quarterback. He was, how we say Peyton Manning was basically the offensive coordinator. Ed Reed was like the defensive coordinator, basically. He was calling that play. We've all seen that clip of where he talks about how he baited Peyton Manning or Tom Brady. I forgot which one, but he basically baited them into. I think it was Peyton actually. So yeah, this guy was the smartest safety that I've ever seen, and he was the best coverage safety of his era. He wasn't great, I would say, or I wouldn't say he was all-time great in terms of in the box. But I mean, who cares if you're so great at coverage? I would still put Ronnie Lott over him because I think Ronnie Lott could do all the things that Ed Reed could do, and then also be great in the box. But I don't have a problem with Ed Reed this high because, again, the most cerebral, smartest safety I've ever seen. Also, like Knife said, a weapon. Once he got the ball in his hands, this guy was dangerous. He was taking it to the house. Once he got the ball in his hands, he could return punts. They didn't do it that much, but he could return punts as well. So yeah, man. And the funny thing about Ed Reed, he came out the same draft as when we drafted Roy Williams, and all the hype was about Roy. Roy was supposed to be the next Ronnie Lott. Nobody thought that Ed Reed was going to be all-time great. I remember that, and it's just funny how you never know, how some of these prospects, how some of these players are going to turn out. But yeah, definitely the best safety I've ever seen since Ronnie Lott.
Yeah, I mean, you guys know how much I value interceptions. Once I saw the stat that he has 64 interceptions and 9 more interceptions in the playoffs, putting him at 73 in 12 years, there is no way I cannot keep this guy at number one. He is number one on my list. 7 interception return touchdowns, that's second among safeties all time. 11 forced fumbles. The only thing about him that was kind of shocking to me is the low number of tackles that he had. He had 646 combined tackles, only 534 solo tackles. But I guess that just wasn't his game. So basically, between 1, 2, and 3, it was very close. Oh, why? I think you have. Here, I'm gonna just be real quick.
I'm sorry.
So basically, between Ronnie Lott, Ed Reed, and Sharper, it was very close for me. But the differentiating factor here was Ronnie Lott was elite in the playoffs. Darren Sharper was elite in the regular season, and Ed Reed was elite in both. And really, that's what you want. That's what you want out of a player, and that's why he is, to me, the greatest safety of all time. So we do have a little bit of time here. So we can go into some honorable mentions here and just kind of talk quickly about them. Do you want me to read you the Rodas list first, though?
Yes.
We definitely want the Rodas list, yeah.
Okay. In absentia here. Ruddy, we still don't know where he is. Hashtag where is Ruddy? Let's please get that going so we can find where he is. This was the Rodas list. Number 10, Charles Woodson. Charles Woodson at number 10, okay? Number 9, and I asked him, he plays, why do you put him on the safety one? He said it because he played safety sometimes. I was like, okay, whatever. Number 9, Kam Chancellor, which I like. Number 8, Darren Sharper. Number 7, Bob Sanders. Number 6, Eric Berry. Number 5, Harrison Smith. Number 4, Sean Taylor. Number 3, John Lynch. Number 2, Troy Polamalu. And number 1, Ed Reed. That was his list.
Whoa.
Number 2?
Polamalu
Ed Reed number 1.
and Ed Reed number 1. That was the
Bob
list.
Sanders.
Bob Sanders,
Bob
Eric
Sanders.
Berry, Sean Taylor. He had them all very high. Harrison Smith. Those guys were at the
Short
the
prime,
very
man.
top
He
of
had a
his
short
list.
Prime. Harrison. What the hell's that, man?
I don't know. He's not even here to talk about it, so I don't know. Maybe he was sleeping when he put this
Like
list together.
I hate on OY for romanticizing the older generation, but that's criminal,
Yeah.
honestly.
Any guys you just want to mention? We don't gotta dive deep into them. We got like 5 or 6 minutes or so. You guys want to mention honorable mention?
Kam Chancellor. Honestly, I had Eric Berry as an honorable mention. Kam Chancellor as well.
Yeah.
Adrian Wilson, man. I was talking to OY right before this call. This guy was really good. I think he had 20, 25, or 24, 27 interception sacks. Earl Thomas, I mean,
Yeah.
if he didn't get hurt, this guy would have been on the list for
Same
sure.
with Cam. You know, Cam only played 8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kam Chancellor was really good for 8 years.
Yes.
Really good for 8 years.
So I actually had Cam on my list. Cam was
I
number
know.
10 on my list.
Yeah.
And he didn't have the stats. He didn't play long enough. But in my opinion, he was the face. He was the heart and soul of that Seattle defense. I
Mhm.
think it's no coincidence that once he retired, the defense started to deteriorate a little bit. I think he set the tone. I think he was better than Earl Thomas, who I had as an honorable mention. Just because since Chancellor, there hasn't been a safety who's that great in the box, right? Chancellor was an in-the-box safety, and he could kind of control the game that way. I did have Sean Taylor as an honorable mention, which is more so like based on potential, like where we saw his career kind of projecting out to. So it's a shame, obviously, that we didn't get to see that.
Yeah, but he doesn't make the list. You can't put him on the list. I mean, there's probably guys who are higher than him on the list. I'm just saying if we project out. No, I'm talking about Roddy's list. I don't know.
Oh,
Yeah.
Obviously, if this guy played, he would have probably been one of the best safeties. But I mean,
I'm kind of surprised now if you didn't have as an. I had Pat Watkins as an honorable mention. I don't know why you didn't have him on here.
I don't know who
I
that
only
is.
did safeties 6'4" and under.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, I had
You know
Laura.
Pat Watkins is, Omar?
No idea.
6'5" safety.
Any guys you talk about that I have never heard of, I'm assuming they're Cowboys. That are
definitely.
just like marginal Cowboys.
He was just the guy that we were just romanticizing.
Yeah.
He was like a
6'5", man.
Yeah.
like safety.
Should have been
Not
playing
even gonna be a
basketball.
beast.
Should have been playing basketball. So some guys that were on my top 10 list that didn't even make it on this list, like I mentioned, Milloy. This guy was the king of tackles. Amazing. I think he was number 1 all time amongst safeties and tackles. Great first name too. Devin McCourty. I had
number 10.
Huh? You had him 10?
I had Milloy number 10.
10. Sorry. Yeah, you did. Devin McCourty. I had him at number 8. I think amongst the active players, he is very clearly the best safety. And if he continues to ascend and play a lot of years, he's going to rack up a resume that puts him.
He's the best current safety.
Resume-wise.
Active.
Yeah. For sure. I don't think it's even really that close.
Harrison Smith.
Derwin.
You can make an argument.
Derwin James?
Oh,
No.
it's still early for Derwin
It's so
James.
early for him. I'm talking about resume-wise. If he continues to play for another 5 years, he's going to crack the top 10 for sure. And then a guy that I'm just going to throw out his name. I don't know if you guys remember him, Sammy Knight. Do you guys remember a guy named Sammy Knight?
Sam Knight. Yeah.
Sammy Knight. Yeah, man. So he was on the Saints, Dolphins, and Chiefs. He had 42 interceptions. Yeah, he was
Number 29.
great player. Great player. I had him at number 7 on my list. It's a shame we don't get to talk more about him. We don't have enough time. But look up Sammy Knight, a tremendously underrated safety as well. So that is our list of the top 10 greatest safeties of all time. I want to thank you all for watching or listening. Again, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. We're really trying to increase our subscribers here so we can, get higher in the algorithm and bring more content to you guys. If you're listening on a podcast platform, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Stitcher is going by the wayside, unfortunately. iHeartRadio, whatever you listen on. 5 stars. Follow us on there as well. And we're on Instagram and Twitter as well, or X. Instagram, we produce a lot of reels that we don't have on podcast. So go on there, follow us on there as well. Want to thank you guys so much again. NF live from Bahrain, OY live from Arum. Thank you guys so much. And we're gonna jump into. I think next is probably linebackers, right, fellas?
Rayto's number 1.
Linebackers as well.
No.
Not number 1, but why not?
Leave you guys with some
Number 3.
breadcrumbs.
Number 3.
There we go.
Number
There
2.
you go.
2 or 3.
Thank you guys so much
Mike
again. You
Parsons,
have
number
that
1.
to look forward to. Have a fantastic day, football fans.
Take care.